Imagine if we believed that we needed $1 million to be happy. If that were true, then until we earned that amount, we wouldn't be able to feel happy. But when we look at the broader picture of poverty in the world and realize the small percentage of millionaires, we can infer that happiness would be a difficult goal to achieve if it required having a large sum of money in the bank. Now, imagine that we crave happiness and feel incomplete until we achieve this state of mind. Up to this point, after many efforts, we have saved $100,000. Although that may be a large sum for most of us, when considering the happiness goal we have set, we still lack $900,000 to fulfill it. Debt is always a burden, making us feel unsettled because it symbolizes an unfulfilled desire. It's only when we achieve what we desire that this debt is relieved. However, if what we desire is rare and easily lost, attaining it becomes more difficult and can also lead to dissatisfaction. From our experience, happiness is often elusive. If we place contentment in things that are hard to attain, our lives will become unstable and insecure. In such situations, we often find ourselves in a state of tension, dissatisfaction, and anxiety. We seem to be constantly worried about not achieving what we desire, or fearing the loss of what we already have, as well as being concerned about an uncertain future. A much more effective alternative approach is to focus on simplifying life. If we don't feel lacking in meeting our basic needs, we will easily achieve a state of contentment. And the quickest way to see abundance is by reducing our demands. When we ask for less, we often receive more. And when we have more, we worry less about gaining and losing. We are less stressed about missing out on opportunities and less fearful of change. This video will delve deeper into the benefits of being content with less money, opening up a life free from constraints, and how we can experience abundance rather than scarcity by adopting a minimalist mindset. When happiness becomes elusive, we often feel compelled to seize every opportunity to attain it. It could be pursuing material possessions, wealth, high social status, an ideal relationship, or even a combination of all these factors. Imagine dedicating all efforts to meet these demands while constantly feeling dissatisfied for not achieving them, because when our needs aren't met, we often can't feel happy. Imagine when we finally possess our precious treasure. We then have to worry about keeping it because losing what we've worked so hard for equates to the end of our happiness. This raises the question, what will life become? When the conditions for our happiness become more specific, satisfying them also becomes more difficult. Especially when we base our happiness on uncertain external conditions, even the slightest changes can threaten the foundation of our happiness. A prime example is when someone desires a perfect life, including a perfect home, perfect family, perfect job, perfect social relationships, and the list goes on. To feel content, every condition must be met. But if any of those things don't reach perfection, their sense of happiness will dissipate like a house of cards. This reverse law has shown that the more we need, the less satisfied we are, and the more we desire, the more we feel lacking. Therefore, the best way to experience abundance is to reduce our demands from the world around us. Abundance is not about having more, but knowing that we have enough. The concept of enough often depends on individual perspectives and experiences. For some, there is never enough, while for others, less is sufficient. Additionally, our idea of enough can change over time and circumstances. For example, when we were students, enough might have simply meant having enough money to buy food and participate in social activities. However, as we progress in our careers, we may feel dissatisfied with lower income levels compared to what we had as students. Fortunately, we have the ability to change our perception of abundance. When we need less, we are more likely to feel satisfied. Additionally, we encounter fewer difficulties in adapting to the unpredictable changes in the world around us, as these changes are less likely to affect what we perceive as abundance. No matter what happens, the oceans remain present, ceaselessly waving as a symbol of stability and permanence on this planet for billions of years. Imagine someone enjoying happiness and contentment with the basics: a set of clothes, a meal, shelter, and a few people to converse with. Their satisfaction isn't dependent on extravagance, but on the simple and abundant things readily accessible to them. This makes them quite resilient, as what they perceive as abundant is always available, not fiercely contested like scarce commodities. Therefore, when we learn to control our desires, we open up opportunities to live in a richer world, away from scarcity and deprivation. While having needs is instinctual for humans, the ability to manage these desires is crucial. As Epicurus knew, if you want to make a man happy, do not add to his possessions but subtract from his desires. This prompts us to seek happiness not only through material accumulation but also through controlling our minds and desires. Below are some ways to convey our desires so that we can move from a state of scarcity to abundance. 1. The power of control. In the previous video, we delved into Epicurus' philosophy in the context of a simple lifestyle. Epicurus categorized desires into 3 types: natural and necessary desires, such as food, shelter, and sleep; natural but unnecessary desires, such as gourmet food and expensive clothing; and vain desires, such as limitless wealth, power, and fame. Epicurus asserted that we should focus on the first type of desires, necessary and easily satisfied, and steer clear of the latter, unnecessary and difficult to fulfill. However, this also opens up a vast space for unnecessary yet abundant and easily accessible needs in the modern world. For example, enjoying music, playing video games, or browsing YouTube. If we look at the abundance of music, games, and videos available today, we'll find them so plentiful it's almost unbelievable. However, we often indulge in them excessively. The issue lies in excessive indulgence, leading to a sense of dissatisfaction even when we have material plenty, because to feel satisfied, we need increasingly more. When our senses become less sensitive and demand more stimulation, this becomes a problem. As we demand more, we often experience less abundance. However, if we're able to wisely choose our needs, we can avoid solutions that disempower us. Philosophers have proposed a virtue called temperance to moderate our desires, so they don't control us. Temperance involves modesty and self-control. If we apply these virtues, abundant pleasures won't dominate us but instead serve us when we choose, keeping them fresh and enjoyable. 2. Appreciating what we have. Humans often focus on what they desire rather than what they already have. However, this means they're trading their current source of happiness for pursuing unfulfilled desires and the accompanying sufferings. The things we possess have already created an easily accessible source of joy. What could be easier than attaining what we already have? Or what is more readily available than what we already possess? When we don't appreciate what we have, we easily feel dissatisfied and therefore strive for something else. However, if we turn to look at what we already possess correctly, we may discover a world of abundance and richness awaiting us. Gratitude for what we have will make those things more valuable. For example, many may consider their homes not big enough, not new enough, or not beautiful enough. But if they can acknowledge and appreciate the accumulation from their homes, a warm place, filled with memories and love, then they'll discover a source of priceless happiness unlike any other home. But they could also look at the glass as half full, not just half empty. A roof over their heads, a small but warm and comfortable living space, and aging doesn't always mean unworthy of living. Despite there being bigger, newer, and more beautiful homes, where they live still provides enough to meet basic needs. A place to call home. Many people live in harsher living conditions, some even without shelter. Compared to them, every home is a dream fulfilled and a reason to be grateful. When we shift from a mindset of dissatisfaction to gratitude, the value of the home will be elevated. Now we cherish and appreciate what was previously overlooked. Therefore, gratitude is not only a free means to achieve satisfaction, it's also a way to save money. If we can satisfy the desire to have a new home, eventually we can achieve a similar level of satisfaction, but we also have to pay a high price for it. 3. Evaluating the cost of desires. Our desires always come with a price tag. Typically, common items will be cheaper, while rare items tend to be expensive. Generally, acquiring an affordable item will be easier than purchasing a luxury item. However, the difficulty of obtaining something still depends on our specific circumstances. For example, a wealthy person may easily own an expensive watch, whereas a poor individual may have to save every penny for many years to afford a similar one. Although the price of the watch remains the same, it appears cheaper to the wealthy person than to the poor person. Therefore, when determining our needs, it's wise to consider whether they are worth the price we have to pay. American philosopher Henry David Thoreau offered a simple rule for this issue. The price of anything is the amount of life you exchange for it. Whenever we desire something, it's sometimes prudent to ask ourselves, How much time, effort, and health am I willing to exchange to obtain it? Purchasing a specific item may require us to work extra hours. And how does that affect our mental and physical well-being? Items that we can attain with only a small amount of life exchanged for them may be considered very worthwhile, whereas those demanding long-term durability and significant investment may be seen as expensive. When we focus attention on valuable and easily attainable needs, we experience abundance. This abundance relies on having readily available resources or small life requirements that can be easily met. Purchasing an expensive mortgage may not be a wise decision if it demands a significant investment of effort from us. Although we may acquire our dream home, in the end, the cost may outweigh the benefits. 4. Creating distance from long-term debt. Debt is not only a financial burden but also a stressful experience because it creates an obligation that we must face and repay. Although we often think of debt in the context of finances, our desires also create a kind of debt to the strictest creditor possible, our minds. So how does the mind become the creditor? When we feel desires arising in the mind, we immediately become debtors. We transition from a state of no debt, where no needs need to be met, to a state of indebtedness. The mind demands that we fulfill desires, and if not, it relentlessly demands like a debt collector. This is inevitable to some extent. For example, when hungry, we must meet the need by eating. When we feel tired and need rest, we must repay the debt by resting. In fact, in most places around the world, food and sleep are readily available. Therefore, meeting these natural needs is not very difficult. But the real challenge begins when we delve into long-term desires that we must fulfill to feel satisfied. When we do so, we create a burden for long-term debt. The feeling of deficiency only dissipates when desires are fulfilled, and this can leave us feeling imperfect for a long time. A typical example of this difficulty is how some people handle unrequited love. Imagine you have special feelings for someone, but that person doesn't reciprocate those feelings for you. If you can't accept the reality and spend the whole day hoping that someday the other person will reciprocate, you're creating prolonged dissatisfaction for yourself. Your mind has turned romantic interest from someone indifferent into a prerequisite for happiness. So, you'll forever be in debt until your mind gets what it wants, which seems like it will never happen. Therefore, hope is not a good strategy for achieving happiness. Instead of solely relying on fulfilling dreams and desires in the future, especially goals that may take a long time to achieve, or perhaps we may never even realize, perhaps we should focus on finding joy in the things available right next to us. Enjoying the present doesn't mean we shouldn't have long-term goals, but rather, we need to appreciate the small things and not let our happiness depend entirely on achieving big goals. We can create happiness with very little, just from the abundant things around us. However, this often requires us to conquer our desires for the world, rather than simply chasing after things beyond our control. Ultimately, there are two ways to create abundance. The first is that we can accumulate more than we need, but in doing so, we easily become dependent on external factors that we cannot control. The second approach is by restraining our desires, so that we can appreciate what we already have more deeply. When we reduce our desires from the world around us, the natural world becomes richer to us. That's why when we desire less, we often end up with more. Please subscribe, like and share our channel.